And this is the Incongruous channel, and I'm Dr. Andy Yates. And as promised, I've just finished uploading my latest show on Beetroot Radio, www.beetrootradio.co.uk, and it's now available on my website, www.drandyyates.com. And before I've even started, my little dog's patting around in the background. So that's Incongruous. That's what it's all about. This is me, au natural, well, so to speak. I got a shirt on. And and I'm just here to kind of do a bit of a brain dump on my show, which gives people an opportunity to see this and see if they want to do my show. And then they can go. Please, please, please. What's been happening is people have been liking me. Because I post this and I share it to Facebook and Twitter. And they've been liking me on Facebook and Twitter, but not on the YouTube channel. So what that means is I don't go up in the rankings, so people don't see it so much. I don't make any money out of this. That's not the point. I'm not interested in wealth and fame. I'm too old for that. I'm just interested in getting a message out there that I think the British people and the people in the world might be interested in. So see what you think. Anyway, I'm also playing with the camera and different angles and different lighting and stuff like this. So eventually I'll improve this. But I don't know that I'm... Oh, there goes the dog. I don't know that I'm ever interested in getting a completely professional thing, because that's what people do whose content aren't that good. So they've got to do some clever technical video. And to me, it's all about the message. So I was talking about, on my show last night, Beetroot Radio, about the NHS. And the main subject of that was the privatisation of the NHS. And I believe the privatisation of the NHS is ongoing right now, today, as we speak, right? And I think you, my listener, and the rest of Britain really need to know about this. I'm sure there are some that do, because there are some that are driving it. People in the government, people in the powers that be, the puppet masters who pull those people's strings. So I just wanted to do a quick brainstorm on that to give you an idea, and so that you can check out on that. And I was at the Higham Ferrers charter celebration yesterday, and I met some really nice people, and I met some people who were really, really quite concerned about the privatisation of the NHS and the loss of our jewel in the crown. Yeah, we can give one of our jewels in the crown back to India, but this one, I think, and I think the rest of the British people think the same as me, we want to keep. So if anybody, our politicians, are changing us or something, that's not democratic, because that's not what the people want. So anyway, they've come up with this minor ailments scheme. What is the minor ailments scheme? It's whereby minor ailments and the issue of minor drugs is being taken away from the National Health Service general practitioners. So what it means is you won't get ibuprofen, paracetamol, stuff like that from your doctor, because you can buy it over the counter. All right. But of course, that's a switch, isn't it? That's a tiny bit of money that used to come from the NHS that's now going over to the private sector. All right. Well, perhaps we should pay for minor ailments. But the other thing is this minor ailment scheme, whereby pharmacists are being trained up so that they can advise and, I won't say prescribe, but recommend medication for minor ailments. And when you think about it, that's one of the jobs that doctors do. So what's effectively happening is a piece of the doctor's scope, their range of service that they provide through the NHS, is being cut away to pharmacies. And you should know, most pharmacies are private businesses. Even though they have an NHS logo, they are actually private businesses. And this is a very successful and ongoing way of chipping another piece out of the NHS and sending it off to private industry. The problem is the pharmacists, and the pharmacists I deal with locally are very good, but they're there for profit. I mean, they've got to look after the patients, because otherwise they wouldn't exist as pharmacists. But they're there not for that reason. They're there to make a profit. And they look after the patients, us people, the NHS patients, because it affects their bottom line. It affects their profits, not because that is their duty. You see, here's the important thing. Do you get it? You see what I'm saying? So I think it's really important. This minor ailments thing, they're actually receiving training. And I believe, and I would be corrected on this, but I believe that that training that the pharmacists are getting, we're paying for. So we're paying for something that we already pay for to be taken off the NHS general practitioners and given to a bunch of private companies. What do you think? You think that's a conspiracy, or do you think it's real? Because it's happening. It's happening right there. Go to your pharmacist, see if there's an NHS logo. They are an NHS provider, not a part of the NHS. Did you know that? Well, you do now. So I've kind of got my notes here, and I'm going to go through my notes as we go through this. I've marked a few places that I thought were kind of interesting. And really, you know, is this idea of getting pharmacists not only to provide all their pharmacist details, and if you've been in lines in pharmacists, I know I go to the one in Higham Ferrers, and it's crowded. There's often queues, there's often lines, you often have to wait quite a long time. I don't mind, I'm a patient guy. But is that a piece of chopping off a piece of the NHS and then privatizing it? It is, isn't it? It's all it is. You know, I don't know that it's benefiting anyone. What would benefit is taking the money that's being spent on that project and spending it on the NHS, the GPs, the doctors, and getting more doctors. So we wouldn't have to send it to the pharmacists in the first place. Does that make sense? Kind of does to me. Is it a more efficient process? No, you're going to be standing in lines all over the place. They say it's to reduce the waiting time at general practitioners, but that's nonsense. I mean, they're just saying that to give it some kind of benefit that they can sell it to you because it's private, because it's all about business. You get it. You understand. People who listen to my shows are not stupid. But sometimes you don't have all the information at your fingertips. Well, now you do because of the Incongruous channel. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. The government says they're increasing the NHS every year. But is that where the money's going to? So yes, we've increased the NHS by £4 million or £4 billion. I don't know what the number is. But is it that that money now has gone off to private companies who may have loans with financial services companies and banks and things like this? So that money doesn't stay in Britain. It goes offshore, or it goes to foreign international companies and banking interests. It's not serving Britain, is it? Privatisation of the NHS doesn't serve Britain. The more you cut people away from the NHS, the more you provide them to private companies who pay their people less. So the standard of living of the country as a whole goes down with privatisation. Oh yeah, there's people at the top who are making a ton of money out of this. The rich few, the upper class elite, whatever they want to call them, the 1% of the 1%, they're loaded, you know. Somebody who's right in the middle of this is Richard Branson. And what's his address? It's Cayman Islands. He's got his own island in the Cayman Islands. And of course that's tax-free, I think. Really? This is the guy, this great British adventurer. And there he is offshore, sucking the money out of Britain and into an offshore account. Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? So there we are. I mean, that's all part of it. Let me look for my little points I made in here, because I just want to follow, because I go off, because it makes me very angry. This lovely piece of Britain. I lived in America for 20 years, and I heard so many people in America say how much they envy the NHS system in Britain. But everything I've seen through this investigation, through this research I did, is we are moving towards the American system. A local reference. My doctor's office is in Rushton. There's a pharmacy attached on the side. Excuse me. It uses the NHS logo. It describes itself as a limited company and has the logo NHS on the end of its company name. Now, as far as I know, that can only be done with permission of the Department of Health and Social Services, I think it is, because the Secretary of State for the Department of Health and Social Services owns the copyright of that NHS logo. and they're allowed to use it. So presumably they've got permission. So I would have to say, logically, in my little conspiracy theory here, that if that's the case, then the Secretary of State is supporting this move towards the privatization of that piece of the NHS. And they put the NHS logo on these things. And does the average, you and I, the common people, do we really look at a sign that says NHS and think, oh, it's not really NHS? No, we think it's NHS, therefore we trust it. But in fact, you're going to a private company who is for profit. Do you get it? Do you get the idea? And that's how it is. And I thought, well, maybe they're all like that. I checked from this pharmacy in Rushden. I checked one in Higham Ferrers. And then I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll check Boots the Chemist at Rushden Lakes. And they don't, that I saw, use the NHS logo. But then I remembered, Boots the Chemist, of course, is an American company, American-owned company. They're owned by Walgreens, the biggest supermarket chain in the United States. So they've already been privatized. It's already been done. See? So it's described, and it's in papers and stuff like this, but it's described that his symbolic NHS logo is being used up and down England by private companies supplying NHS services, and a public healthcare campaigner has warned it is simply privatization by deceit and demonstrates an increasing fragmentation of care. And the problem is if everything's run by these private companies, there's no coordination, there's no collaboration focused on patient care. It's all focused on profit, for profit. You get it. What else have I got? Keeping an eye on the time. I want this to be short. So I mentioned about the NHS logo being copyrighted. Virgin Care, I talked about Richard Branson. The Virgin Care said, oh, we've got strict rules and all this kind of thing. We help the best patients understand that we're working in partnership with the NHS. We're really proud of the high quality service offer. And then Richard Branson sues the NHS, the people he wants to work for, because he didn't get a contract. Yes, Richard Branson, the head of Virgin Care, who provide NHS services, sued the NHS and won. And now the NHS is going to have to spend money or costs related to that case. Why? Because if we hadn't bothered doing this in the first place and trying to outsource the NHS to private companies, that would never have happened. How did we gain money on this? How did that provide any benefit? Do you get what I mean? You see how it's happening subtly all over the place. And then I look at Donald Trump's visit. And Donald Trump with his US trade deal, and I talked about this a little bit in the other download I did. He wants the NHS as part of this negotiation between the US trade deal when we leave Brexit. The opportunities the United States has to grab pieces of our pie, one of those that's been openly spoke about is the NHS. He said the NHS is definitely on the table. And here we are. And who is the CEO? I've got to look this up now. Who is the CEO of the NHS? Well, it's a guy called Stephen. Oh, gosh. A guy called Stephen. We'll call him Stephen for the moment while I'm looking for it. Simon Stevens. He's a former private insurance man. He used to work for the United Health Group, which is the USA's biggest health insurer, right? And he used to work for a global division of this conglomerate whose sole purpose was to increase markets for the business, for United Health business outside of America. And now he's CEO of the NHS. What do you think? How did that happen? How could it be allowed to happen when it seems on paper so obvious that this guy's a spy? He's there to start moving the NHS towards the American model, which I will tell you is not good. It's not good for poor people. It's not good for people who struggle to pay. It's not good for people who can pay. It's not good for anyone. It just makes money for those few people, those mega rich people. And do we want it? I don't think so. I don't think so. And people like the health secretary, Matt Hancock, who incidentally went to Oxford University. You'll hear me say that a lot. He was criticised for providing 21 NHS contracts worth £127 million to be tendered. And he's the guy who said, the NHS is not for sale. He's one of these ones that says, it will not be on the table. No privatisation on my watch. And then he sends these contracts out to private companies. Two-faced? What do you think? And then the International Trade Secretary, Dr. Liam Fox, who's a key Brexit voice in the cabinet, said, well, it's up to the government. Whatever the government is, I'm paraphrasing, because he did an interview on LBC, he said, whatever the government is, they'll decide what they want to do with their public services. Now, they're not their public services. They're not the government's public services. They're our public services. The NHS is ours. We pay for it, right? We pay for it through general taxation, through national insurance contributions from employees, employers, and the self-employed. We pay for it. Therefore, it's ours. So we should decide what happens to it. And I would think that there is an enormous majority of people, if we ran a referendum on it, which we won't, but if we did, I think an enormous amount of people would say, do not privatise the NHS. Anyway, this is the Incongruous channel. That was my thought dump. Don't forget, the show, the expanded version of what I've just talked about, is on www.drandyates.com, drandyates.com. This is the Incongruous channel, as I said, on YouTube. Please, if you like what I say, or you're interested, or you appreciate my efforts, or something, or at least it's made you think, or it's made you shout at me on the screen, please, down the bottom of YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. Because what's happening is people are liking me on Facebook, liking me on Twitter, but not on YouTube. So please, like, share, and subscribe. It's been my pleasure to bring you this, the people of Britain and the world. Please enjoy, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care.